When Halloween got a reboot back in 2018, I went into the movie not very enthusiastic. This series had been rebooted, I don't know, like two or three times already by that point, and I wasn't really sure, this was going to be very good, but I wound up being pleasantly surprised. I actually quite enjoyed the 2018 Halloween film. I think it was probably the best film in the series since the first one. And of course, in this current iteration of Halloween, this newest reboot, they're ignoring everything that's happened in the series except for the first film. All the other films, even Halloween 2, it's as if those films never existed. So I actually wound up quite enjoying the film. I thought it was really well made. I thought the plot overall was pretty good. I thought they did a pretty good job of bringing Michael back and reestablishing the characters, and I thought that the film, the story it told was pretty good. They subsequently announced that there was going to be a trilogy of these films, and the second one in the series, Halloween Kills, was supposed to be out last year, last Halloween in 2020. That got pushed back because of the pandemic, of course. So, how is Halloween Kills? Is it any good? Well, it's the film has some issues. I actually, when I first came out of it, I was actually feeling pretty good about it. But the more I look back and the more I kind of thought about it, the more I realized the problems that the movie has. So let's just go ahead and get into it here. Now, Halloween Kills picks up. It's that same Halloween night in 2018, and we pick up with I think his name is Cameron. He's the boyfriend of Laurie Strode's granddaughter. If you'll remember in the 2018 film, and by the way, this will have spoilers, just to let you know, this is going to be a spoiler filled review. We pick up with Cameron, and if you'll remember from the 2018 film, they had gone to this costume party or dance or whatever at their high school. And of course, they went as Bonnie and Clyde, but this is, the 21st century, so they switched the roles. So she was dressed as Clyde, and the boyfriend Cameron was dressed as Bonnie because, isn't that clever? And we see him, and of course, in the 2018 film, Allison caught him kind of flirting with this other girl, and they, I don't know, broke up for lack of a better term. And we see him walking down the street afterwards, and he's calling up his friend. I forget the guy's name, but the friend, of course, isn't answering because the friend got killed by Michael in the first or the previous movie. And then Cameron sees a body laying in the street, and it turns out to be Officer Hawkins, who was in the last film. He was played by Will Patton. And in the last film, at one point, Hawkins sees Michael while he's driving around, and then he rams Michael with his patrol vehicle, his SUV, and then he gets out of the vehicle and is going to finish Michael off. But Dr. Ranbir, who is the psychiatrist who was working on Michael, and who we later discover is kind of got this unhealthy obsession with him, attacked Officer Hawkins, stabbed him in the neck, and seemingly had killed him. Cameron finds Hawkins laying in the street with a bad wound to his neck, but Hawkins is still alive. Hawkins kind of wakes up and he starts kind of mumbling, and he starts talking about how we have to kill him, he has to die, all this. Then we get a flashback to Halloween in 1977. And we pick up after the end of the first movie, after Loomis had shot Michael. And Hawkins finds Michael in an alley, tells him to freeze. Of course, Michael doesn't. He shoots at Michael a couple of times, but misses, and Michael gets away. Then some other cops arrive, and they decide to split up and search the neighborhood and try and find him. Then we go to a local bar, and it's a local bar that we're introduced to some new characters. Now, first of all, we actually get some characters from the first movie who come back. I don't know if you'll remember, but there's a scene in the 2018 film where Michael is kind of walking down the sidewalk, and there's this couple, they're a black couple, and they come out of their house and they're getting in their car. Apparently, they're in costume, apparently going to a party. And they kind of see Michael, and I think the woman kind of looks at him like kind of uncomfortably. But then they drive off, and it seems like they're just kind of throwaway characters. So they reappear in this new movie. And they're at a bar, and this local bar is having like a talent show, and people are performing up on the stage. And then we get introduced to some other characters played by Anthony Michael Hall and some others. And it turns out that these other characters are the survivors of that Halloween back in 1977. Anthony Michael Hall is playing Tommy Doyle, who was the boy that Laurie was babysitting on that night. And then there's Lindsay, who was the girl that was being babysat by the other girl. I forget her name, the one that Michael strangles in the car. And then the nurse who was in the car at the beginning of the original Halloween film, who Michael kind of attacked before he got in the car and drove off with it. And then there's another guy named Lonnie, and we get a flashback with him showing him on Halloween night, and he was being bullied by some other kids. Then some cops drove up and warned them there's a killer on the loose, so you need to get home. Go home right now, lock your doors, and stay there. So then the other kids leave. Then Lonnie starts to head home, but then Michael shows up and comes after him. He trips and falls, and Michael comes right up to him, and the kid, he like covers his eyes and is begging, like, please don't kill me. And then when he opens his eyes, Michael is gone. So he's a survivor as well. And I guess they meet every Halloween, maybe, kind of like a support group or something. Then we finally go back to Michael, who is in Laurie's house, which is burning down now. The fire department arrives to put out the fire. One of the firemen falls through the floor down into that basement where Michael was trapped. Of course, Michael gets loose, and then he murders the whole group of firemen, kills them all, and then heads back into town. While this is going on, Laurie and her daughter Karen and her granddaughter Allison get to the hospital, and Laurie had been stabbed, in the abdomen in the last movie, so she goes into surgery. Now, at this point, the news is starting to report the murder of the fire department. And so word starts to spread about this, that these people have been killed and that Michael is loose again and he may be the one behind it. Then we go back to the bar, and when they get news of this, Tommy, played by Anthony Michael Hall, tries to start assembling a mob, basically, to go hunt down Michael and kill him. Now, the black couple, they get kind of nervous, so they decide to go home. The female, she goes out to her car, but then she comes running back in and says that Michael Myers is in my car, because there's someone in her car she doesn't know. And then Tommy gets a bunch of people, and they go out to confront Michael and attack him. Now, you don't see who it is in the car, but there is someone in the car, and then that person drives off in the car, but he really just kind of drives down the road and around the corner and then wrecks the car. So they chase after, and when they get there, the car is empty. Now, they don't see who it is, but it turns out that the person who was driving the car was one of the mental patients who was in that bus that Michael was in the last film that wrecked, and then, the mental patients all got out along with Michael. It's one of them, and he kind of slips away unseen. Now, Laurie comes out of surgery, and she's put into a hospital room. Now, and she's, of course, post-surgery, so she's, like, out cold. While that's going on, the sheriff talks to Karen, Laura's daughter, and reveals to her that, yeah, actually, Michael's not dead. He survived, and he escaped. Now, by this point, the bodies are starting to pile up in the hospital. And so there's quite a crowd that's starting to accumulate in the hospital. And, of course, a lot of them are angry, and they're anxious. So then Tommy arrives along with Lonnie as well to get recruits to go out and hunt down Michael, and Allison decides to go with them. It's during this time also that Cameron, along with Officer Hawkins, they arrive at the hospital, and Hawkins is put into the same room that Laurie is in, and then Cameron decides to go with his father, Lonnie, and with Tommy, and with Allison to go find Michael and kill him. Now, Laurie awakens, and she talks to Karen, but Karen doesn't tell her that Michael's still alive. And then Officer Hawkins awakens, and then Laurie and Hawkins, they talk. And as they talk, first of all, it's revealed that apparently at some point it seems like they had a relationship, maybe. They had something between them. But anyway, Hawkins then has another flashback where he relates what happened on that Halloween night after Loomis had shot him. So after the cops separated to try and find him, after Hawkins had tried to shoot him and missed, Hawkins and his partner figure, he's probably going to go to his old house, or maybe he will. So they go to the Myers house and they're searching the place. They found the dog. They find the dead dog, if you'll remember, when Loomis and Sheriff Brackett are in the house in the first movie, they find a dead dog. So they come to the house and they find the dead dog. Of course, they split up. And while Hawkins is searching one part of the house, his partner goes to search the upper floor, kind of the front areas where the bedrooms are. Basically, he goes to the room where Michael killed his sister. And of course, Michael springs out of the shadows and attacks him. He's screaming and yelling for help. Hawkins comes running and he finds Michael there strangling his partner to death. Now, Michael is holding the partner up in front of him, like right in front of him, basically as a shield, so Hawkins can't get a clear shot, but he's got his gun drawn and he's telling Michael, let him go, and surrender now. And of course, Michael's ignoring him. And I guess because he's panicked, Hawkins winds up accidentally firing off his gun. He shoots his partner and kills his partner. Now the partner falls to the ground. Hawkins is, of course, shocked and dismayed that he's killed his partner, so he goes to help his partner while Michael just leaves. Michael walks out the room and heads down the stairs. Now you can hear voices outside confronting Michael. You can hear yelling. Hawkins then runs to the top of the stairs, and he at the bottom of the stairs, Loomis comes into the house. Dr. Loomis, from, of course, played by Donald Pleasence from the first Halloween film. Now, I don't know how they did this, because if it's CGI, it's really good. It's totally convincing. But I assume it's some CGI or something. But anyway, he comes in and he yells at Hawkins, what did Michael do? Did Michael kill again? Or something like that. Then he turns around and goes outside. Then we get a shot from the front of the house. One of the cops comes up behind Michael and hits him in the leg with his club. That causes Michael to fall to the ground. Then Loomis points his gun at Michael's head and is going to finish him, but then Hawkins pulls his weapon away, and of course, Michael survives. Now, Lindsay, the adult Lindsay, and the nurse, whose name I forget, and the black couple, they get in a SUV and they're driving around looking for Michael. And of course, any people they see walking around, they're warning, hey, go home, there's a killer out. They find a playground and there's a couple of kids on the swings. So Lindsay goes over and warns the kids, hey, you have to get out of here. You have to go home. They don't believe her, but of course Michael turns up and starts attacking, and he winds up killing the nurse and killing the black couple. And he kills one of the kids too, although that happens off screen. We don't see it. Then he goes after Lindsay, but Lindsay manages to hide and evade him. A little later, Tommy comes up in his vehicle with Lonnie and Allison and Cameron, and they find Lindsay, but they also find all the bodies of the people that he killed. So they take Lindsay to the hospital. Now, at the hospital, of course, by this point, there's pretty much a mob at the hospital. People are angry, people are upset, wanting to know where their loved ones are. The bodies are piling up. In the midst of all this, the mental patient shows up, and someone thinks that the mental patient is Michael and says, there's Michael Myers. And of course, that sets off the mob and they go berserk and chase after the guy. He runs away, like up the stairs, up into the hospital. The mob's coming after him. And at one point, Laurie and Karen, who are there, see the guy and realize it's not Michael. They try to tell people, that's not Michael. But of course, the people are just like out of their minds at this point and don't listen. And Tommy is egging them on, and also Brackett is there. The Brackett, who was the sheriff in the first film, he's, I guess, a security guard at the hospital, and he's there, and he's also whipping him into a frenzy. They keep chanting, evil dies tonight, evil dies tonight. And this whole sequence really kind of drags on, to be honest. The crowd comes after him anyway, and long story short, the mental patient, he winds up getting out of a window and jumping to his death and killing himself. And it's afterwards that they realize, oh, it wasn't even Michael. They drove this guy to suicide for no reason. Now, while attempting to stop the mob, Laurie winds up aggravating her abdominal wound, so she winds up being taken back to her hospital room. While that is going on, Michael goes to his childhood home, back to the Myers house. The Myers house is inhabited by a couple, a gay couple, and of course Michael kills them. And Lonnie looks at a map, which, I mean, who carries a paper map anymore, but he's got a map of town, and he points out that the locations of all the killings show that Michael is heading back to his house. That they make a straight line back to Michael's house, so they decide that's where we need to go to find him, because if he's not there, he'll be there eventually. And Karen decides to go with them. Now they wind up splitting up. Lonnie and Allison and Cameron go to Michael's house while Tommy takes some other people, and he's out like to search the town to see if they can find him somewhere else. They get to the house, and of course the house is now dark. The lights are all out. Lonnie tells Cameron and Allison to wait in the car. He goes in. They wait a few minutes, then they hear gunshots. So then Cameron and Allison go into the house. And of course, Lonnie's been killed by Michael. And then he kills Cameron. And then he goes after Allison. And he's about to finish Allison off when Karen arrives and stabs Michael in the back with a pitchfork. Michael then turns and comes after Karen, and they wind up wrestling, and Karen manages to get Michael's mask off. She then kind of uses the mask to kind of lure Michael out of the house away from her daughter, and lures him into an alley nearby where Tommy and a bunch of other people are waiting, and then this mob turns on Michael and attacks him. And again, most of them just have like blunt weapons. They've got bats and other types of clubs. One person has a gun and shoots him in the chest several times. Finally, he goes down. And then he's kind of like reaching for his knife, and then Karen grabs the knife and stabs him in the back with it. And that seems to kill him. He goes still. And then Tommy tells Karen, look, we're okay. Go take care of your daughter. We'll handle it here. So then Karen goes back to the house to find Allison, and then the police arrive at the house, and EMTs arrive as well. Now back in the alley, of course, Michael's not dead. He springs back to life and turns on the mob of people, and he kills them all, including Brackett and including Tommy, who has his head bashed in with his own baseball bat. Then we go back to the house, and the daughter, Karen, she goes up the stairs to the room again where Michael had originally killed his sister all those years ago, and she's staring out the window, and then Michael pops up behind her and he murders her, and that's the end of the movie. And it's obviously setting up, a final confrontation in the third film. So, when I first saw this movie and it came out of it, I felt, I'd kind of thought, well, this isn't bad. But in retrospect, the more I think about it, the more I see the movie has problems. First of all, this movie feels very much like the only reason this movie was made was to stretch this movie out to a trilogy. The movie makes some interesting connections to the original film, and it builds upon the lore of the first film in some interesting ways, but really just nothing much comes of it. All the characters from the first film that they bring back, they pretty much all get killed off. So it feels kind of pointless to have brought them back. And even though this film is only about an hour and 45 minutes, it feels kind of padded. Again, the whole mob scene goes on longer than it needed to. And, if you want kills, if you're seeing it for the violence, for the gore and the kills, the movie definitely delivers on that respect. Michael, he's got to kill, I think, at least 20 people in this film. But again, looking back on it now, I think part of that was, again, just trying to kind of stretch the movie out to make more of it than was really there. And the whole mob thing seems kind of pointless. Again, initially when we're introduced to Tommy and these other survivors from the first film, you're obviously meant to sympathize with them. But then Tommy whips this mob up, and they wind up basically killing an innocent guy. Well, I don't know if innocent is the word. This guy was a mental patient from an asylum. Who knows what he may or may not have done, so I don't know if I can say he's innocent, but he wasn't Michael, and which is why they were after him, and they wind up getting the guy killed, which seems to be sending the message that this whole mob mentality was a mistake. At one point, Brackett says, I'm afraid Michael is turning us all into monsters. We're turning us all against each other. But then at the end of the movie, Michael is confronted by this mob of people, including Tommy and including Brackett, and they attack him and seemingly defeat him at first. So again, it's like, well, wait, is our mobs bad or are they good? I don't see slasher films for a message. I don't necessarily need to have a message in these films, but if you're sending a message in this film, or any film, then I think the message should at least be consistent and be clear. And the film seems really muddled about what it's trying to say about mob violence or vigilantism or mob mentality and that sort of thing, which was kind of frustrating. And again, the mob scene itself seems kind of like indicative of the whole film. It really didn't need to be there, and it doesn't really seem to amount to much. And that's kind of what I feel about the whole movie. Again, technically, it's a well-made movie. It's well directed. The performances are good. It certainly delivers on the violence and the gore. If you're seeing it for the kills, you'll be really pleased. But overall, I found the movie. The more I think about it, I find it kind of disappointing. It's a film that I feel like didn't really need to be made. It just really feels like it's stretching this series out so that they can make another movie and make some more money. It kind of reminds me of the Hobbit movies. The Hobbit movies probably, instead of a trilogy, they probably would have made a pretty good part one and part two, but instead they stretched it out to three movies. And I kind of feel the same way here. I think they could have done a part one and a part two, and this probably would have been better. But instead, they've made this extra film in order to stretch it out to a trilogy, and it just really feels like it didn't need to be made. Now, they've already said that there's going to be a third film, but from what I've heard, apparently the third film is going to do a time jump. Apparently, they're going to do this in order to somehow relate the story to the pandemic in some way, which seems dumb to me. It just really sounds like a mistake, and overall, I'm just not getting a good feeling about what this third film is going to be like. But as for Halloween Kills, I'll go ahead and give it 2.5 jack-o'-lanterns, I guess. I mean, it's not terrible, but you can skip it probably. If you're not, unless you're a big horror fan and a real Halloween fan, you probably really don't need to see this movie. Anyway, have you seen the film? If you did, what did you think of it? Let me know in the comments, and while you're at it, please do like this video. And while you're at it, also please do sub to the channel and hit the bell for notifications, and I will see you all next time. Thanks for watching.